You know that feeling, don't you? That moment when the world around you just stops moving. Your ears buzz, your heart pounds so hard you think someone might hear it from across the room. That's exactly how I felt that Monday morning, walking into the 14th floor conference room at Blue Peak Dynamics and seeing Richard Hale already waiting inside. I hadn't been warned, just a simple calendar invite from Tracy in HR. Quick alignment, 9 o'clock a.m., room 1420. No urgent subject line, no red exclamation mark. Only one thing made my stomach twist: the fact that Richard's name was on it. Richard Hale, the new CFO from the parent company, Helix Systems, the man known for his philosophy of optimizing headcount with a scalpel, not scissors. The room felt colder than usual when I walked in, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the air itself. Tracy sat on one side of the table, clutching her laptop like it was armor. Richard looked at me the way someone studies a balance sheet: cold, precise, detached. I tried to smile, set my coffee down, hoping this was just another budget discussion. Then Tracy slid a folder toward me. Her eyes didn't meet mine. The title on the front page read, Proposed Adjustment to Compensation and Role Structure, Management Level. We're restructuring after the merger, Richard said, his tone as flat as an AI voice. The company needs to align salaries with market standards. For your role, the new annual rate will be $68,000. I blinked. I'm sorry, how much? 68, he repeated, down from 172, a 60% reduction, effective in 2 weeks. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because there was nothing left to hold on to. We understand this might be difficult, Tracy murmured, her voice so soft it almost disappeared. So we're giving you 24 hours to consider. If you decline, we'll have to treat it as a refusal and proceed with termination. I looked straight at Richard. You know my situation. You know I'm a single mother. You know my husband passed away 2 years ago, and I'm raising my daughter alone. You know all that, don't you? He tilted his head slightly, as if weighing the answer. I do. But I also know you're practical. You'll make the right choice for your family. And that's when it hit me. They weren't just cutting my pay. They were using my life as leverage. I picked up the folder. I'll need 24 hours. Very professional, Richard said, standing as if the meeting were over. I walked out toward the elevator. Someone greeted me in the hallway, but I couldn't tell who. I don't remember pressing the button or the ride down, only that I ended up sitting in my car, still gripping the folder. Rain had started to fall. For 20 minutes, I just sat there, not starting the engine. The windows fogged up from my breath. In the rearview mirror, I saw a tired woman, mascara smudged, eyes red, hair unwashed, after another sleepless night. I had given so much to Blue Peak. Skipped my sister's graduation to pitch to a major client. Slept on a conference room sofa 3 nights in a row while my husband was in the hospital and still sent the report on time. I had put Blue Peak before my family, before myself, and now they had reduced me to a number on a spreadsheet. My phone buzzed. It was Emma, my daughter. Mom, are you coming home early? I need help building my solar system model. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. I only knew one thing. I had 24 hours. Not to choose between a paycheck and unemployment, but to decide whether I'd keep letting other people define my worth. I know I'm not the only one who's ever been cornered like this, not because you failed, but because you were the easiest one to hurt in the room. And if you're hearing this right now, maybe you're somewhere similar. Maybe you're on your way to work, or sitting in a small cafe, looking for a quiet moment before another long day. If so, could you leave me a comment? Something simple, like, listening from Chicago, or, I've been through that too. I want to know where you're from. I need to know I'm not just talking to a screen, because I want to believe that somewhere out there, someone understands exactly what I mean, and that this story, the one I thought was only mine, might also be yours. I don't know how long I sat in the car. All I know is that when I wiped the raindrops from the glass, the sky was still gray. Winter in Seattle never really brightens. It only shifts from one shade of gray to another. Eventually, I started the engine. Not because I wanted to go home, but because if I sat there any longer, I knew I'd start crying. And once I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. Our apartment sat in the southern part of the city, the place Emma and I moved into after my husband passed away. We used to live east of the lake, near Washington, in a small house with a backyard and a row of tomato plants I never got to care for. After the accident, I sold it all, paid off the hospital bills, and moved here. Smaller, farther, but at least it was ours. I pushed open the door, the hinge creaking the same familiar sound. Emma was sitting on the floor, gluing foam planets onto her solar system model. She looked up when she saw me. "You're home early?" I tried to smile. "Yeah, I think I needed a break." "Something happened at work?" I meant to say no, but my throat closed up. I just shook my head. Emma looked at me for a while, then quietly went back to sticking Saturn onto the board. She has her own kind of silence, not pressing, not asking, but I know she feels it. I went to my room, shut the door, and for the first time that day, I broke down. Not the cinematic kind of crying, not graceful tears, the real kind, shaking, choking, clutching my chest as if I could hold my heart together. I had poured everything into that job. I once presented a proposal wearing a black dress I'd worn to my husband's funeral. I sent a financial report from an ER room when Emma had an asthma attack. I missed her birthday because a client needed a last-minute meeting. And now I'd been salary adjusted like an unnecessary expense. That company used to mean everything to me. I joined Blue Peak when it was just a basement office with 12 people, 2 ping pong tables, and one naive dream that we were changing the world. I remember the overnight deadlines, the waffle truck runs, the cheap coffee that tasted like victory. I remember the day I got promoted to head of client strategy, when Vernon, the old CEO, hugged me and said, "We couldn't have done this without you." Now Vernon had sold the company to Helix and vanished. Rumor said he was in Costa Rica, living in a beachfront villa and ignoring emails for 6 straight months. And me? I was sitting here, struggling with a spreadsheet, trying to figure out how to live on 60% of what I used to make: rent, medicine, tuition, food, a winter coat for Emma. It didn't add up. My phone buzzed. Email from HR. Reminder: please respond to the offer by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I checked the clock. 8:17 p.m. I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal budget sheet. More red than green. I typed in new numbers, adjusted projections, cut the cost of Emma's asthma meds. From the company plan, replaced it with private coverage, 3 times higher. I deleted, recalculated, and deleted again. Nothing worked. I wondered, did Richard ever actually care? No, he knew everything. The employee file spelled it out: single income household, dependent child, financial hardship. He knew, and that's exactly why he chose me. People like me don't have exits. We don't have choices. And that's what disgusted me most. Not the pay cut, the way he weaponized someone else's vulnerability for his own gain. I walked back to the living room. Emma had fallen asleep over her model, a streak of dried glue on her cheek, her hand still clutching a paper map of the planets. I lifted her gently, tucked her into bed, and pulled the blanket over her. Her breathing rasped slightly from the cold, the inhaler resting by her pillow like always. Then I went back to the table and opened my laptop again. I didn't know what I'd do tomorrow morning, whether I'd accept, refuse, or walk away without looking back. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't let anyone decide my worth just because they believed I had no choice. Not again. I couldn't sleep that night. The light in my room stayed on, but it couldn't chase away the heaviness pressing down on my mind. I lay there, eyes wide open, listening to the clock tick like it was counting down to 9 a.m., the deadline for my decision. A choice between losing most of my income or losing the job I'd given more than a decade of my life to. Both felt like defeat. I got up around 3 in the morning and made a cup of peppermint tea, the only thing left in the cabinet. I hadn't realized until then how empty my fridge had become. I opened my laptop and sat in front of my personal spreadsheets, salary breakdowns, expenses, and my employment contract. I reread the section on salary adjustment. Nothing illegal, just inhumane. Then my phone rang. It was 6:12 a.m. The first light was slipping through the blinds, just enough for me to read the name on the screen. Maya Lopez. It took me a few seconds to remember. Maya had worked with me at Blue Peak more than 5 years ago. We used to share lunches on the back steps, stay up yelling at broken slides, and curse at the CRM when it crashed before a client demo. Then one day, she quit. Her reason? I don't want to keep sacrificing my health for a job that doesn't value me. I was the one who walked her to her car. She turned back and said, I hope one day you choose yourself too. And today, she was calling me. I answered. Her voice came through bright and full of energy, despite the early hour. Lena, I know it's early, but I've been trying to reach you all week. You didn't see my LinkedIn message? I haven't really checked LinkedIn lately, I said, my voice hoarse from a sleepless night. That's okay, I get it. But listen, I'm at Novacor now, and we're looking for a director of client strategy for the Western region. I sat up straight. I hadn't even had coffee yet, but my heart was racing like I'd had 2 shots of espresso. Novacor, Helix's biggest competitor, a company that had taken 3 major contracts from us in just 6 months. I'm still at Blue Peak, I said, though even I didn't know if that was true anymore. You don't have to explain, but if something's happening, I want you to know. We need someone like you here. Not temporarily, long term. I already mentioned you to the CEO, and he's basically waiting for your signal to set up a meeting. Why me? I asked quietly. I'm not that special. I just work. That's exactly why, Maya said. You've held almost all of Blue Peak's top clients for the past 4 years. I know that because I worked with you, and the clients know it too. Trust me, we've talked to a few people, and every single one of them asked, Is Lena coming? I went silent. I thought back to that meeting yesterday. Richard Hale's expressionless face, his words trimmed down like a financial statement. No one there ever told me I mattered. Only Maya, someone who had left, reminded me I once did. Do you have a non-compete clause? She asked, a hint of caution in her voice. I scrolled to the end of my contract. No, I joined before the Helix merger. They never updated our contracts. Perfect. I'll schedule a meeting with the CEO. We're moving fast, but for you, we'll wait. I thanked her and hung up, my hand still trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in months, I felt something lift off my chest, like someone had just pulled me out of a pit I didn't realize I'd been sinking into. I walked into Emma's room. She was still asleep, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. I sat by her bed and watched her tiny face for a moment. It's okay now, I whispered. Mom's got a new chance, and this time, no one's going to underestimate me. By 7:20, I was dressed. The dark gray suit I used to wear for major client presentations. White shirt, hair tied high, a soft shade of lipstick, no heavy makeup. I didn't need it. I wasn't going there to impress anyone. I was going to reclaim what I'd lost, my confidence. At 7:45, I was in the car, driving downtown. The Novacor building appeared through the windshield, sharp and gleaming, both familiar and distant. I turned off the radio, parked, and stared at the silver-blue spiral logo rising over the glass tower. I once thought I'd stay with Blue Peak forever. That loyalty was something no one could buy. But maybe loyalty isn't meant to be exploited. Maybe real loyalty is to yourself, to your child, to what you deserve. I took out my phone and typed a message to Maya. I'm here, ready to talk. Message sent. No nerves, no regret. And in that moment, sitting there with my hand on the steering wheel, I finally understood what I'd forgotten all these years. I have worth. And it's not defined by a number on a paycheck. It's in what I've built, what I've protected, and what I've fought for. There's a kind of silence that lives in big buildings in the early morning. Not a gentle, quiet, but a structured one, as if every wall is whispering the stories it's not allowed to tell. I walked into Novacor's main lobby at 8:10, my heels clicking steadily against the polished stone floor. The receptionist smiled, handed me a visitor badge, her expression natural, not forced. No one looked at me like I was a threat. No one winced at my presence. I wasn't used to that. 2 days earlier, walking through Blue Peak's hallways had made eyes drop and heads turn away. Rumors traveled faster than any email server. I didn't need confirmation to know what they were saying. She's in trouble with management. Heard she refused a pay cut and made a scene. She's probably leaving soon. When you become dead weight in a company's eyes, you can feel it, even in the silence. The meeting with Novacore's COO took place in a glass room on the 18th floor. No long conference table, no projector. Just 3 chairs and a coffee table. Morning light poured through the windows, making it feel more like a conversation than an interview. Cameron Steele, the CEO, shook my hand. His tone was calm, his smile easy, without pretense. Maya was already there, giving me a small nod, the kind that said, "You're safe here." We talked for 40 minutes about the client strategy, about CRM transitions, about why Helix had been losing contracts this past year, and about me. "I know you held Westech, CloudNova, and Alaris for 4 straight years," Cameron said, not glancing at a single document. "And when they almost pulled out, you personally worked with legal to turn it around. That's not in any internal report, but people in this industry talk." I blinked. "How do you know that?" "Clients," he said easily. "You have relationships Helix can't buy. That's what we need." The meeting ended with one promise: an official offer within 24 hours. I left Novacore feeling strangely light, not exactly happy, but like something heavy had been lifted off my chest. I hadn't said anything to Blue Peak. I hadn't responded to the pay cut proposal. I hadn't resigned. Technically, I still had time, but I could already feel the clock ticking. I walked back into Blue Peak around 10. No one asked where I'd been. No one looked at me. Everyone was too busy pretending not to. I opened my laptop and had barely started replying to emails when Tracy from HR walked in, holding her computer and a stack of papers. "Can we talk?" she asked, her eyes flicking away. We went into a small meeting room. She sat across from me, sighed softly. "Richard wants your decision," she said. "The deadline was this morning." "I know," I replied. "I'm still considering." Tracy hesitated, then placed a document on the table. "I need to inform you. There's been an internal investigation opened. It concerns several files sent from your IP address last night. Possible breach of client data." I froze. "Last night?" I said. "I didn't send anything." "There's a log entry from your computer, 8:12 p.m. A file containing client information was sent to a non-company Gmail address." "And Richard thinks it was me?" She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Her eyes said enough. She didn't believe it, but she wasn't going to risk saying that out loud. I sat there for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "All right, if that's how he wants to play it, he'd better be ready." I went back to my desk, opened my system logs, and combed through every access record. Nothing unusual, no outgoing messages, no attachments. I checked the trash, drafts, and temporary folders. Nothing. But I knew one thing for certain: I hadn't sent any files. A sharp thought cut through me. Someone had accessed my system, maybe remotely, maybe directly. And the only person with that level of access was Richard. I texted Mark Delaney, an old friend, former legal advisor for Blue Peak before Helix took over. He'd moved into private consulting, but I knew he still kept close ties with the old team. "I need to meet," I wrote, "serious and urgent." He called back in under 5 minutes. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "Don't say anything over the phone. 11 a.m. Old coffee shop by the East Warehouse. Bring everything you have." I hung up, my hands shaking. Looking around the office, I saw faces that used to be familiar, now turned deliberately away. Not because they hated me, but because they were afraid. Afraid that if they stood too close, they'd be next. And maybe they were right. I gathered my things, shut down my computer, and walked out without a word. As the elevator doors closed, I caught sight of Richard stepping out of a conference room down the hall. Our eyes met for less than a second. But it was enough. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he thought I'd bow my head and take it. He was wrong. The old coffee shop sat wedged between a row of weathered warehouses on Seattle's east side. It used to be the unofficial meeting spot for me and Maya, our panic room with caffeine on those afternoons when back-to-back meetings and red flag emails were closing in. Now I was back, alone, in a real panic. Mark was already there, tucked in the far corner, a steaming latte on the table. He stood when he saw me, shook my hand, firm enough to remind me I wasn't alone. I told him everything. The meeting with Richard, the pay cut offer, the trap is disguised as a choice, and now the accusation of a data breach. Mark listened without interrupting. Occasionally, he nodded, jotting a few notes into a worn leather notebook, the same one he'd carried back when he was advising startups. When I finished, he asked one question. Lena, are you sure no one else had access to your computer? Absolutely. It's password locked. I don't share my login, and if someone accessed it remotely, I'd know. I use personal monitoring software. He nodded. Good. I don't doubt you. But if we're going to go up against Helix, we need more than your word. He tore out a page and wrote down 2 names. These 2 used to be on Blue Peak's old data security team. They were pushed out after the merger, but rumor has it they still have backups of the original system logs. If anyone breached your machine, they'll find it. I took the paper and slipped it carefully into my bag. Just knowing I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't all in my head, felt like a light cutting through thick smoke. And one more thing, Mark said, his voice lowering. Don't go back to the office. I looked up. Why? They're collecting evidence. If you step back in, they can set another trap. Let your attorney handle communication from now on. I clenched my hands on my knees. The feeling of defeat crept up like static in my chest. I never thought I'd leave Blue Peak. Like this. Mark met my eyes, gentle but firm. No one thinks they'll be the first one thrown overboard, but when they do, you either learn to swim or you sink. I nodded, silent. That afternoon, I picked up Emma earlier than usual. She was sitting on the school steps, reading a science book, half asleep in the sunlight. When she saw me, she smiled. You're early. I sat beside her. I had time today. She looked at me, curious, but didn't ask. Emma has always sensed change without needing words. What do you want for dinner? I asked. Pizza, but homemade, like last time. Deal. We drove home in quiet peace. No music, no rush. As if time itself was giving me a moment to breathe. At home, Emma ran into the kitchen for dough and cheese, while I sat at the table and opened my laptop. The newest email was from HR. Official notice of temporary suspension pending internal investigation. The words hit like a slap. I'd expected it. It still hurts. An hour later, Emma and I were sitting on the couch eating pizza, watching an old cartoon she loved. Between the laughter on screen, she asked, Mom, is something wrong at work? I turned to her. Her eyes weren't as innocent as I like to believe. They belonged to a child who'd grown up too soon, a child who had once seen her mother cry in the kitchen and quietly close the door so no one would know. Yes, I admitted. There's a problem. Are they going to fire you? Maybe, I said, but I won't let them take my dignity, not again. She nodded, understanding more than I expected. Then she said something that left me speechless. I don't need you to be the best mom. I just need you to be happy. You've been sad for too long. That night, I stayed awake again, but not from fear, from planning. I texted the 2 contacts Mark had given me, set up meetings, reviewed every file on my laptop, deleted sensitive data, changed passwords, turned on 2-factor authentication. I drafted a written statement for HR, 1 copy only, printed and signed, to be delivered through my lawyer the next day. It said, I did not transmit any client data outside the company. I request a full copy of the system access logs, and I require an independent third party to be present during any hearing. I wasn't the naive employee anymore. I didn't believe in company culture or slogans on the conference room wall. I was a mother, a woman who had already lost everything once. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone take what remained. At 7 the next morning, an email came in from Maya. Are you okay? I just spoke with Cameron. We're ready to send the official offer today. Call me when you can. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. The opportunity was right there, real. tangible, everything the last few years had tried to take from me. But before I could step through that new door, I needed to close the old one properly. I wouldn't run. I would leave as someone who fought to the end and kept her integrity intact. I stood, put on my dark coat, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same woman, but her eyes, sharper, steadier, awake. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to break again. There's a very specific feeling that comes when you know you're about to strike back. Not anger, not impulse, just a cold, steady calm, the kind that comes after you've endured enough and finally decide to stand. I was never the confrontational type. I didn't shout, didn't slam doors, didn't send emails with subject lines in all caps. I believed in quiet retaliation, the kind that doesn't announce itself until you're already standing behind them, truth in hand. At 9 in the morning, I called Mark Delaney. I reached the two people you mentioned, I said. They're willing to help. And here's the important part. They built Blue Peak's original network log system before the merger, and they still have an internal backup. Mark went silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Perfect. Have you met them yet?" "This afternoon," I replied. "And one more thing. I found a new admin account added to the system within the last 30 days. No notification, no assigned owner, but it has full access to my machine." Mark exhaled slowly. "That's the key. If we can prove they planted access on your computer without notice or legal justification, then counter litigation is entirely possible. Did you capture it?" "Yes. Saved to an external drive, and I'm not keeping it at home." "Good work, Lena," he said, sounding equal parts impressed and proud. "You ready for the next step?" I looked over at Emma, sitting on the sofa, reading. She had learned to share my silence without creating distance, just being there, reminding me who I was fighting for. "I'm ready," I said. "It's time." That afternoon, I met Carlos and Jen, two cybersecurity engineers who had been part of the old Blue Peak team. They chose a cafe in Fremont where people ordered cappuccinos by name, and the croissants melted the second you bit into them. Carlos still wore his usual beanie, and Jen had cut her hair short, focused, composed. "We heard from Mark," Jen said, "and we heard about Richard Hale, not exactly shocked that his name's tied to the word trap." I handed them the system logs and my notes on the new admin account. They plugged in the drive, ran their security software, the screen filled with lines of access code and timestamps. 20 minutes later, Carlos spoke softly, as if not wanting to disturb the gravity of what he'd found. "There's unauthorized access, just like you said, and the timing matches the outgoing file. But here's the fun part." He turned the laptop toward me. The IP came from the executive floor, 15th, private server belonging to, let's see. Jen scrolled through the list. Richard Hale. I didn't know whether to laugh or curse. He really thought no one would notice, that standing high enough in the hierarchy made him untouchable. "I need copies," I said. "Everything that confirms the access point, the time, and who created the account." Carlos nodded. "You'll have it all before 10 tonight. PDF and raw data. But brace yourself. Turning this around won't come without consequences." "I've been living with consequences all week," I said. Now it's his turn. I called Mark again around 7:30 that evening. His voice was steady, but I could hear the restrained satisfaction beneath it. "Excellent," he said. "Tomorrow morning, I'll file a request for an independent internal audit, signed and verified by a third-party compliance team. I've also reached out to someone in Helix's audit division. They've suspected Richard for a while, for redirecting restructuring funds into his personal bonus pool." I leaned back in my chair. The pieces were finally falling into place. "There's one more thing we'll need," Mark continued. "A witness from inside, someone who was in those meetings or saw what HR was told." I fell silent. Tracy. I didn't know if she'd stand with me, but I knew one thing: she wasn't bad, just scared. I drafted a message, short, gentle, no pressure. "I know you've seen what's happening, and you know it isn't right. If you're willing to tell the truth, not just me, but everyone from the old Blue Peak team will be grateful. I don't want to drag you into trouble, but I can't stay silent while being framed. Lena. I sent it, then placed my phone face down, palms damp with sweat. I wasn't expecting much, but I hoped, and sometimes hope is enough. At 10 p.m., her message came through. I have a recording of Monday's meeting. Richard said, and I quote, "If she won't accept the pay cut, make sure she can't work anywhere else. I don't know what to do with it, but I'll meet you if you keep this quiet." I read it 3 times, not because I doubted her, but because I couldn't believe she'd kept proof. I replied, 8 a.m. tomorrow, same cafe in the South. I'll come alone. It was nearly midnight. I didn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from the thrill of being alive again, for the first time in months. Tomorrow, I'll have the recording, the logs, a witness. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be the accused. I'd be the one bringing everything into the light. That morning, something in the air felt different. The sky was still gray, the way it always is in Seattle, but the light cutting through the clouds carried a strange kind of chill. I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning my black coat, straightening the white collar underneath. The woman in the reflection didn't look tired anymore, only calm, ready. When the elevator stopped at the 14th floor, I could hear my own heartbeat. The doors opened, revealing the familiar hallway, the gray walls, the framed slogans of Helix's core values hanging in perfect symmetry. I used to take pride in those words. Integrity, collaboration, respect. Now they sounded hollow. The conference room door opened with a dry click. Inside, Richard was already seated, flanked by 2 lawyers, with Tracy sitting quietly at the corner. No one looked at me. Everyone kept their eyes on the papers in front of them, as if eye contact were an act of defiance. I pulled out a chair. The sound of it scraping the floor echoed across the silence. Richard finally looked up, his voice sharp and deliberate. "We just want to clarify a few matters," he said evenly. "The salary adjustment proposal was approved by Helix's board, not a personal decision. As for the data breach, that's a serious allegation. We'd like to hear your explanation before taking further action." I didn't look at him. I looked at the small recorder on the table, its metallic surface reflecting every face in the room. "Explanation?" I said softly. "I'm not here to explain. I'm here to prove, huh?" I placed a small USB drive on the table, setting it down as gently as if the air itself might break. A faint click followed as I played the first file. Richard's voice filled the room, clear, cold, undeniable. "If she won't accept the pay cut, make sure she can't work anywhere else." The room froze. No one breathed. Tracy lowered her eyes. The 2 lawyers glanced at each other, then at Richard. A few seconds later, he gave a dry laugh. "Interesting," he said, forcing composure. "My voice, clearly, but obviously edited. I'd like to know what exactly you expect to accomplish with this stunt." I didn't answer. Instead, I opened another file. This one, a certified log extract from Blue Peak's old security engineers. The evidence glowed across the screen. An access session from the executive floor. Account name, R. Hale Admin. Access time, 8:12 p.m. The exact moment the breach occurred. There was nothing left to explain. Tracy's hands trembled as she set her folder down. Her voice quivered, but her words didn't. "The recording isn't edited," she said. "I captured it during the internal meeting. And I saw the log request Richard made to 8 to monitor Lena's account. I've been silent too long." No one moved. The only sound was the clock on the wall, ticking like a hammer. One of the Helix lawyers cleared his throat. "We'll need to verify this independently," he said. "But if what Ms. Tracy states is accurate, the suspension will be lifted pending review." I looked at Richard. His face had gone pale, jaw clenched, so tight, a vein pulsed at his temple. In that moment, I realized how fragile power really was. It only takes one person telling the truth for it to collapse. He tried to speak, his voice low and tense. "You think this ends here? You've just made yourself a liability. You'll never work in this industry again." I tilted my head slightly, meeting his stare. "Maybe you forgot," I said. "I don't need your permission to exist." Tracy turned toward me, her eyes filled with both fear and gratitude. I nodded. She had done the right thing, and she knew it would cost her. The meeting ended in silence. No one spoke as I stood, slipped the USB into my coat pocket, and walked out. The sound of the glass door closing behind me felt like a period at the end of a long, brutal sentence. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Each step echoed like a drumbeat in my chest. Faces I once called teammates turned away as I passed, but this time it didn't sting. It just felt light. Before stepping into the elevator, I looked once more at the sign. Helix Systems, Blue Peak Division. How ironic. They love talking about vision, about the future, about people being their greatest asset. But in the end, all it took was one meeting, one document, one decision, and people became numbers. As the elevator doors closed, I saw my reflection in the glass, standing tall, eyes steady. I wasn't leaving as someone fired. I was leaving as someone who took back what was stolen. That night, when I opened my laptop, an email waited in my inbox from NovaCore. We are honored to welcome you, Lena Carter. Your official contract is attached. The benefits package includes full family coverage and a signing bonus. We believe your value extends far beyond numbers. I looked at the screen, then at Emma, sitting at the table coloring the solar system model she hadn't finished days before. Emma, I called softly, we've got good news. She looked up, eyes wide. You got the new job? I nodded, smiling. I did, and this time I'm coming home on time. Emma ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. I closed my eyes and breathed in deep. For the first time in years, I felt peace. 2 days later, an internal memo circulated. Richard Hale was suspended pending investigation. Tracy left the company quietly, but before she did, she sent me a single line. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. I replied, thank you for speaking when it mattered. None of us stays silent forever. That night, I stood on the balcony of our small apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. The wind carried the scent of rain and distant traffic. I thought about 9 years of work, sleepless nights, endless meetings, the husband I'd lost, the daughter, sleeping behind me. There are things you lose that feel like everything, but sometimes they're just the beginning of finding yourself again. I pulled out my phone, opened Maya's message, and typed, "When can I start?" A minute later, her reply came, "Monday, welcome home." I smiled. This time, home wasn't a glass tower or a corporate slogan. It was a place where I was respected, where my voice wouldn't be silenced, where worth wasn't defined by numbers. And from that moment on, I had won. That morning, the light felt softer than usual. Dawn slipped through the blinds, tracing thin golden lines across the wooden floor. Emma was still asleep, her face peaceful, a rare sight after so many restless nights. I stood there for a moment, watching her breathe, then quietly slipped out of bed and into the living room. The apartment felt calmer than it had in weeks. The ceiling fan hummed gently. The early light touched the edge of the table. The little potted plant by the window rustled softly in the draft. I opened my laptop. One new email waited at the top of my inbox. Welcome to NovaCore, Lena Carter. Your official contract is attached. We're honored to build the future with you. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the file. The words were crisp and clear. Base salary, signing bonus, full insurance for Emma, and legal protection clauses. I read the line that said, "Start date Monday," and felt a quiet smile rise to my lips. I texted Maya. I accept. When do I start? Seconds later, her reply lit up the screen. Monday. Welcome home. I went to the kitchen, brewed a cup of coffee, and let the aroma fill the room. I stared into the dark surface of the cup. It looked like more than coffee. It looked like a new beginning. Stepping outside, the air felt lighter. My footsteps sounded softer on the familiar streets. The world was the same, people rushing, storefronts opening, but this time, I wasn't the woman being watched. I was the one choosing. When I arrived at Blue Peak, Helix, for the last time to finalize my offboarding, I walked through the halls like a visitor, not an exile. Faces turned as I passed. Some smiled weakly, others looked away. I didn't stop for small talk. I only gave a quiet nod to each of them, a silent thank you for the chapters we once shared. Tracy was standing by HR's door. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke, but her expression was warm, steady. She had chosen truth, and we both knew it. I gave her a small smile and kept walking. The first day at Novacor came quickly. I sat in a bright conference room, greeted by open smiles, a warm cup of coffee, and sunlight spilling across the table. Maya sat across from me, beaming. Cameron stood, shook my hand, and introduced me to the client strategy team. It didn't feel like an interview or a test. It felt like a beginning. They asked about my vision, about how I built relationships, about what I believed in. I told them about the clients I'd kept for years, about how trust, not numbers, built loyalty. They listened. They nodded. At one point, Cameron smiled and said, "We didn't hire you for 60%. We hired you for 100% of who you are." When I left that room, the contract in my bag felt heavier than paper. It felt like validation. Walking through Novacor's glass hallway, looking down at the busy Seattle streets below, I thought, I'm finally in the right place. A place where people see you as an asset, not an expense. That evening, I came home early. Emma had finished her homework and was curled up on the sofa with a book. I sat beside her, pulled her close, and just listened. The rustle of the pages, the whisper of wind through the leaves outside, the steady rhythm of her breathing. I thought of the last few months, the fear, the long nights, the betrayal, and wondered who I would have become if I hadn't stood up. I looked at her and whispered, I found a new place, a place where I don't have to bow anymore. Emma smiled, not a big smile, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing your mother has survived something hard. Weeks later, the news spread. Blue Peak. Helix was losing major clients. Contracts were being pulled. The board launched an independent audit. Richard was removed from the executive team. And for the first time in years, people inside began to speak again. The slogans about people being our greatest asset were rewritten, this time with meaning. One afternoon, a message popped up on my screen from Tracy. I'm working at Novacor now. Thank you for the chance. I replied, welcome aboard. Let's build something better, fair, honest, and worthy of our daughters. One evening, on the balcony of our new apartment, I stood watching the ribbons of car lights below, the drizzle soft against the railings. Emma stood beside me, looking up at the cloudy sky. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and breathed in the quiet. I thought about everything behind me, the tears, the threats, the silence, the exhaustion, and everything ahead, a new home, a new job, a new kind of peace. People once told me I was just a number, a cost, replaceable. I believed them, until they needed what couldn't be replaced. The knowledge, the trust, the relationships no spreadsheet could measure. I looked at Emma and said, they took 60% of my salary, but that helped me find 100% of my worth. She closed her eyes, leaned her head on my shoulder, and whispered, you're the strongest woman I know. I smiled and kissed the top of her head. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a story about a phone call that changed everything. It was about reclaiming yourself, about how, when you're pushed to the edge, all it takes is one clear, steady voice, and the world finally hears you. 6 months had passed since I walked out of Helix with a USB in my coat pocket and my spine finally straight for the first time in years. 6 months was enough for the trees to change, for Emma to learn a new song, and for me to rebuild a life from the ashes they left behind. At Novacor, I wasn't just the new hire. I became the one reshaping how the entire division treated its clients. Within 3 months, I'd won back 3 strategic contracts from Blue Peak, worth over $10 million. By month 6, I was promoted to Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships, leading a team of 12, most of them people once overlooked at their old jobs, just like I had been. I still remember walking into that first meeting in my new role. No one asked if I was strong enough. They asked, Lena, how far do you want us to go? Meanwhile, Helix was cracking. First they lost clients, then credibility, then people. After Richard's suspension, An independent audit revealed what I'd been saying all along: unauthorized cost cuts, unauthorized access to employee systems, including mine, and most damning of all, a culture described as fearful, silent, and devoid of respect. Within a single quarter after my departure, their Western Division's revenue dropped 40%, $27 million lost. Industry headlines read bluntly: "Where Lena Carter goes, clients follow." I never went after anyone. I didn't have to. Clients know who they trust. They follow values, not logos. One Thursday morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. "Lena Carter?" "Yes." "This is Gerald Knight, CEO of Helix Systems." For a moment, I said nothing. In my mind, I could still see that gray conference room where Richard once pushed a pay cut proposal across the table, and now their CEO was calling me. "I know what happened," he said. "I know Richard was suspended, and I know the company lost significant clients after you left." "And?" I said evenly. "I'd like to propose a collaboration, perhaps an independent advisory role. We believe you could help us rebuild trust." I laughed, not with joy, but with disbelief. "You know what they did to me. They turned me into a cost line. They made me believe I had no choice." "We were wrong," he said quietly. I was wrong. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I drew in a slow breath. "I've already found my value, Mr. Knight, in a place that never asked me to prove it. They trusted me from day one. I'm not coming back, not out of anger, but because I don't owe anyone there a single thing." I hung up. Once again, the choice was mine. That same afternoon, Maya called me into an unscheduled meeting at Novacor. "Lena, we want you to speak at the National Client Summit," she said. "Not just about business, about what happens when people are treated with respect." I nodded, and for the first time, it felt like more than recovery. It felt like ascent. After that event, I was invited for 2 magazine interviews. One headline read, "From a 60% pay cut to executive leadership, Lena Carter on the power of refusing silence." Around that same time, Helix replaced its CEO. Richard was officially terminated. The Blue Peak West office underwent a full restructure. Several major contracts migrated to Novacor, not for discounts, but for trust. One evening, I got a message from Tracy, now long gone from Helix. "I was pushed out after everything, but I'm starting fresh somewhere new. Thank you for giving me the courage to speak up." I replied, "We all deserve to work where truth is respected. Thank you for not staying silent." That night, I stood by Emma's bedside, watching her sleep, her face softer, freer than ever. From the drawer, I pulled out the Novacor card they'd sent me. "Congratulations on joining our leadership team. Thank you for standing up." I placed it gently on Emma's desk. Tomorrow was her school's science day. I'd be in the front row this time. My handwritten name tag would sit right there among the other parents, no longer hiding worry behind a polite smile. I hadn't lost 60% of my salary. I'd reclaimed 100% of my worth. And to think, it all started with one phone call, but it ended with something far greater, a life where I would never bow my head again.